What happens when a strict, no-nonsense teacher tries to humiliate the quietest girl in class, only to discover she's secretly a math prodigy who solves an impossible problem on the spot? This shocking revelation turns the entire school upside down. You won't believe how it all unfolds. Roosevelt Middle School in New York was always buzzing with the kind of chaotic energy that only a building filled with teenagers could muster. Hallways echoed with laughter, complaints, and the clattering of lockers. But Room 103 had its own unique rhythm, a rhythm defined by the sharp, commanding voice of Miss Carter. She was a force of nature, respected, feared, and undeniably intimidating. A veteran teacher in her 40s, she wore her no-nonsense attitude like armor, daring anyone to challenge her authority. Students didn't just fear failing math, they feared failing Miss Carter. On that particular Thursday morning, Miss Carter was more tense than usual. The recent math test scores had been abysmal, and she was in no mood to tolerate what she perceived as laziness. The seventh graders shuffled to their seats, weary from yet another lecture about their lack of effort. In the far corner of the room, where shadows from the cloudy sky filtered through the dusty windows, sat Sophia Adams. If Room 103 had its own rhythm, Sophia moved in a completely different tempo, one so quiet it almost went unnoticed. Her presence was a whisper, a soft breath in the room's whirlwind of noise. She was always there, always blending into the background as if she had mastered the art of invisibility. With her curly hair falling over her face and her head bent low over her notebook, she looked every bit the average, unremarkable student. No one knew that beneath that calm, silent demeanor was a mind that could cut through complex mathematical problems like a knife through butter. Sophia had learned from a young age that being noticed rarely ended well. Standing out meant drawing attention, and attention could lead to ridicule. She had been the new kid once, back when her family moved from a quieter part of upstate New York to the bustling city. Back then, a slip of the tongue, a too eager answer in class, had earned her the dreaded label, know-it-all. She didn't want to make that mistake again. So, Sophia learned to disappear, to become the quiet genius in the back row, solving advanced problems in the margins of her notebook, never daring to raise her hand, no matter how simple the question on the board. Ms. Carter's voice cut through Sophia's thoughts like a blade. "This," she said, holding up a worksheet, "is basic algebra, basic, and yet half of you can't even figure it out." The disgust in her tone was palpable, the kind that made students squirm in their seats. Yeah, Miss Carter slammed the worksheet onto her desk, and the sound reverberated around the room. "What will it take to make you care?" Sophia kept her head down, her pencil tapping softly against the paper. She wasn't scared of Ms. Carter, not exactly, but she hated the way her teacher could make even the brightest students feel dim. It was like being caught in a storm where every word hurled by Miss Carter felt like a hailstone, hard and cold. Sophia knew that keeping quiet was her best defense. The room was silent now, tension straining the air. Miss Carter's gaze swept across the students like a hawk searching for prey. Then it landed on Sophia. "Miss Adams?" she called out, her voice slicing through the silence. "You've been awfully quiet. Let's see if you're paying attention." Sophia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers gripped the pencil tightly, and for a moment she felt nauseous. Why her? Why now? She glanced up, meeting Miss Carter's eyes briefly, before dropping her gaze back to the notebook. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. Miss Carter didn't ask a question. Instead, she marched to the board and began writing, no, carving, a sprawling equation across the chalkboard. It stretched from one end to the other, complex and intimidating, with variables and exponents crammed together in a chaotic dance of numbers. The room collectively held its breath. Sophia's heart sank. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a trap. Miss Carter wanted to prove a point, And Sophia was the chosen example. The teacher turned around, one eyebrow arched. "Solve it," she commanded. Sophia didn't move. She could feel the weight of the entire class pressing down on her, waiting for her to fail. A few students whispered under their breath, and someone stifled a laugh. Miss Carter crossed her arms, clearly expecting Sophia to stumble. In that moment, something shifted inside Sophia. Maybe it was the humiliation of being singled out, or the unfairness of the impossible question. Maybe it was the years of silence finally bubbling to the surface. Whatever it was, it propelled her forward. She stood, legs trembling, and walked to the board. The chalk felt cool and foreign in her hand. Sophia's brain hummed with possibilities, but fear clawed at her thoughts, trying to tear them apart. She glanced at the equation, and slowly, the patterns emerged. She saw the path, step by step, solution by solution. She started writing. At first, the chalk moved hesitantly, but then her strokes grew more confident. She broke down the problem, isolating variables, combining like terms, rearranging the equation with a precision that seemed almost graceful. The classroom was utterly silent, every student glued to the unfolding spectacle. Miss Carter's face lost its sternness, replaced by something resembling surprise. As Sophia approached the final answer, the energy in the room shifted from expectation of failure to stunned realization. Sophia circled the answer, dropped the chalk back into the tray, and turned around, refusing to meet Miss Carter's gaze. The teacher stepped forward, inspecting the work as if searching for a flaw. Finding none, she looked at Sophia with an expression that was almost respect. Sophia walked back to her seat, the silence still thick around her. For once, she wasn't the invisible girl in the back row. She was the girl who had just done the impossible. The room was deathly quiet after Sophia finished writing the final number on the board. The chalk had left a trail of pale dust on her fingers, and her heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed to echo in the stillness. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, but she didn't dare turn around. The weight of their expectations, their disbelief, their judgment, all of it pressed down on her shoulders like an unbearable burden. Miss Carter moved slowly toward the board, her footsteps measured and deliberate. She stared at the complex solution that Sophia had just completed, her eyes scanning every line, every number, as if searching for a mistake that would confirm her initial assumption that this quiet, withdrawn girl couldn't possibly have solved the problem correctly. Sophia could feel her stomach twisting into knots. She had never wanted attention, never wanted to be in the spotlight. All she wanted was to go back to her seat, to blend into the background like she always did. But something had changed. Sophia knew she had solved it correctly. It wasn't arrogance, just certainty. The kind that came from countless nights spent hunched over library books, immersing herself in equations far beyond her grade level. It was the kind of certainty that kept her awake, driven not by competition, but by an unrelenting curiosity and a love for the challenge. Still, doubt crept in like a whisper, gnawing at the edges of her confidence. Miss Carter's finger traced the final line of the equation, her lips moving as she calculated in her head. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Then something else, something that looked almost like disbelief. She glanced back at Sophia, and for the first time, there was no trace of condescension or irritation. Instead, there was an uneasy realization that she had gravely underestimated this quiet girl. Clearing her throat, Miss Carter addressed the class, but her voice lacked its usual sharpness. "Class," she began, still glancing back at the board as if to reassure herself that the solution was indeed correct. "It seems that Sophia has correctly solved the problem. This, this is not just correct, it's impressive." A ripple of shock went through the room. Students exchanged looks, some wide-eyed, some whispering in disbelief. Lisa, sitting a few rows ahead, shot Sophia a look of pure admiration. mouthing, "Wow." Even Jake, who usually prided himself on being the class clown, was stunned into silence. Ms. Carter turned to Sophia once more, her tone softer now. "Sophia, how did you know how to do this?" Sophia hesitated, unsure of how to explain. I, I just broke it down," she managed. "It made sense once I saw the pattern." Miss Carter raised an eyebrow. "You saw the pattern?" she repeated, as if trying to process how a seventh grader could see through a problem that would stump most high school students. Sophia nodded, but kept her gaze fixed on the floor, too overwhelmed to face the room's astonishment. One of the boys in the back muttered, "Is she like some kind of math genius or something?" A few students giggled, but it wasn't in the usual mocking way. It was more like nervous laughter, like they had just witnessed something they didn't fully understand. Sophia wanted to shrink back into her seat, to fade away like she always did. But there was something undeniably different now, a shift in how her classmates looked at her, in how Ms. Carter spoke to her. It wasn't just about solving a math problem anymore. It was about being seen, really seen, for the first time. And it terrified her. Ms. Carter seemed to compose herself, straightening her posture as she turned to address the class. "Sophia has demonstrated a level of understanding that goes beyond the typical curriculum," she said, her tone now more measured, almost respectful. "This is an example of what happens when you think critically, when you push yourself beyond what's comfortable." Sophia could feel her cheeks burning. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from Miss Carter. The class murmured again, this time in a tone tinged with admiration rather than scorn. Miss Carter finally allowed Sophia to return to her seat, and as she did, Lisa gave her a discreet thumbs up. Sophia managed a faint smile in return, still grappling with the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. After class, as the students filed out, Ms. Carter called Sophia to stay behind. The room emptied, leaving just the two of them, Mrs. Carter looked at her, the usual sternness softened by curiosity. "Sophia," she began, "I didn't know you were capable of that kind of problem solving. Have you always been this interested in math?" Sophia nodded hesitantly. "I just, I like figuring things out. It's like a puzzle. I study it on my own sometimes." Ms. Carter looked genuinely thoughtful. "And you never spoke up? You never thought to show what you could do?" "It's easier to be invisible," Sophia whispered, almost to herself. Ms. Carter's face softened. "Sometimes," she said, "we think it's safer to hide what makes us different. But your talent is something remarkable, and you shouldn't be afraid to show it." The sincerity in Ms. Carter's voice was unexpected, almost unsettling. Sophia didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. As Sophia walked out of the classroom, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of pride. The quiet girl who never wanted to be noticed had done something impossible. She had been seen, and it wasn't as terrifying as she thought. The days that followed the math incident were surreal for Sophia. The quiet corridors of Roosevelt Middle School seemed suddenly louder, filled with whispers and conversations that all seemed to orbit around one central topic: her. Sophia Adams, the girl no one noticed, had become the subject of fascination, curiosity, and even admiration. It was a transformation that made her feel both exhilarated and exposed. Lisa had been Sophia's constant companion, buzzing with excitement over her friend's newfound recognition. At lunch, Lisa couldn't stop talking about the reaction from their classmates. "You know, even Jake was talking about it. I think he's still in shock. Everyone is. I knew you were smart, but that was amazing, Sophia." Lisa's enthusiasm was comforting, but Sophia still found it hard to believe that anyone could be genuinely impressed. Sophia didn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal out of it. She had just done what she always did: solve a problem. The difference was that this time, she had done it in front of the whole class, and that visibility changed everything. It was like she had shattered the image everyone had of her and replaced it with something entirely unexpected. For the first time, her brain, her way of thinking, was out in the open, and there was no hiding it anymore. Miss Carter seemed different too. In the past, the teacher's interactions with Sophia had been limited to the occasional reprimand for being too quiet or not participating enough. Now there was a spark of interest, almost a challenge, in Miss Carter's eyes. It was as if she were re-evaluating everything she had previously assumed about Sophia. After class one day, Miss Carter approached her and asked her to stay behind. When the room emptied, Miss Carter sat at one of the front desks, gesturing for Sophia to sit next to her. "Sophia, I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other day," Miss Carter began. Her tone was more gentle, almost curious rather than judgmental. "I honestly didn't know you were capable of that level of problem solving. Why didn't you ever let anyone see what you can do?" Sophia shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to explain. I just, I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted. And I didn't want to make anyone feel bad. Sometimes it's easier to just stay quiet." Ms. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "You know, being good at something doesn't mean you have to hide it. You have a gift, Sophia. A real gift. I'd like to help you develop it." That was the moment Ms. Carter mentioned the math club. Sophia had heard about it before, mostly from Lisa, who once considered joining before deciding it wasn't her thing. The club met after school and prepared for math competitions, which sounded terrifying to Sophia. Competing against other schools? Showing her abilities to complete strangers? It felt like too much. But Ms. Carter was persistent. "I'm not saying you have to compete right away," she clarified. "But joining the club could help you practice, work with other students who also enjoy math, and maybe learn some new things. Just think about it." Sophia hesitated, but there was something undeniably thrilling about the idea of sharing her passion with others. Maybe it wouldn't be as scary as she thought. With a reluctant nod, she agreed to attend just one session. That first math club meeting was awkward. Sophia sat at the edge of the group, listening as the older students discussed their latest problem set. Max, a confident eighth grader who seemed to know everything, led the discussion. When Miss Carter introduced Sophia, he gave her a once-over, clearly skeptical. "All right, let's see what you got," Max challenged, handing Sophia a problem that looked like a nightmare of variables and fractions. The room seemed to pause, waiting for her reaction. Sophia looked at the paper, took a deep breath, and let her mind break it down. Within a few minutes, she had written out a solution, clean and precise. Max looked at her work and then back at her, his expression shifting from doubt to respect. "Okay," he conceded. "You're legit." From that day forward, Sophia was no longer just the quiet girl in the corner. She was part of the team, and slowly, the fear of being seen started to dissipate. Max even became a sort of friendly rival, always trying to one-up her with new problems he found online. Lisa, of course, remained Sophia's biggest supporter, though she joked that all the math talk made her head spin. One evening during a particularly difficult club meeting, Ms. Carter introduced a new challenge, a statewide math competition. Max immediately volunteered the group, but Ms. Carter looked pointedly at Sophia. "You should lead the team," she said. Sophia's stomach dropped. Lead? It was one thing to solve a problem quietly, another to take charge. She hesitated, but Lisa nudged her from behind. "You've got this," she whispered. The weeks leading up to the competition were intense. Sophia spent hours after school practicing with the team, learning to explain her thought process out loud instead of just writing it down. Ms. Carter coached her, reminding her that leadership wasn't about being the loudest, but about guiding others. When the day finally came, Roosevelt Middle School's math club walked into the competition hall with Sophia at the front. As the problems were announced, Sophia felt the familiar rush of excitement. Numbers and variables danced in her head, and despite the audience and the intimidating competitors, she found herself immersed in the challenge. When the results were announced and Roosevelt took first place, Sophia couldn't believe it. Her team cheered, Ms. Carter clapped with pride, and for the first time, Sophia felt like she belonged not just as a thinker, but as a leader. When they returned to school the following week, the hallway buzzed with congratulatory whispers. Sophia had never seen so many people smile at her, wave, or even give her a thumbs up. It was as if her success had made her visible in a way that being quiet never could. For once, she wasn't afraid to be noticed. She was proud of what she had achieved. Miss Carter called her into the classroom after the excitement had settled down. "You did well, Sophia," she said with a rare, warm smile. "You didn't just solve the problems, you brought the team together." Sophia felt a swell of pride, realizing that leadership wasn't just about being the smartest. It was about inspiring confidence in others, just as Miss Carter had done for her. For the first time, Sophia knew that her quiet strength was something powerful, something worth sharing, and she was no longer afraid to embrace it. The weeks following the competition victory at Columbia University were transformative for Sophia. She walked through the halls of Roosevelt Middle School with a new sense of belonging. No longer the quiet girl at the back of room 103, she was now someone students admired, even looked up to. It was a strange feeling, thrilling yet daunting. Sophia wasn't used to being the center of attention, but there was something undeniably satisfying about knowing that her talent had finally been recognized. Lisa, as always, was by her side, brimming with pride. "You're like a celebrity now," Lisa teased one day at lunch. "Everyone's talking about how you beat the high schoolers at their own game." Sophia just smiled, still a little overwhelmed by the attention. She wasn't sure how to respond to the waves of admiration and curiosity coming her way. Even Jake had softened his tone around her, no longer the cocky class clown, but someone who nodded respectfully when he saw her. It wasn't that Sophia had suddenly changed who she was, it was that her peers had finally seen beyond her quiet demeanor. Miss Carter had also changed. She seemed lighter, as if shedding the rigid expectations she once had for her students. One afternoon, as Sophia stayed behind to discuss a new math problem, Miss Carter paused and looked at her thoughtfully. "You've changed the way I think about teaching," she admitted. "I used to believe that pushing students hard was the only way to make them succeed. But you've shown me that sometimes all someone needs is the space to be themselves. I should have seen your potential sooner." Sophia looked up, surprised. Ms. Carter, the woman who had once made her feel small and overlooked, was admitting fault. It was humbling and validating at the same time. "It's okay," Sophia replied. "Sometimes, I guess, I didn't really want to be seen." Miss Carter smiled. "Well, now that you're out of the shadows, I don't think there's any going back. You're a leader, Sophia. People are inspired by you." The realization settled over Sophia slowly. Being a leader didn't mean being loud or bossy. It meant setting an example, being brave enough to take the first step, even if it terrified you. It was about showing others that it was okay to be passionate about something, even if it wasn't popular. Encouraged by Ms. Carter, Sophia began to get more involved in the math club, not just as a participant but as a mentor. Max, who had initially been skeptical of her abilities, now came to her for advice on particularly tricky problems. The dynamic had shifted, not because Sophia asserted dominance, but because her quiet confidence drew people in. The club meetings became more collaborative, with members sharing their approaches rather than competing for the spotlight. One day, Miss Carter announced that the club had been invited to present at an inter-school math symposium. The idea was to showcase how middle school students could tackle high school level problems. Naturally, everyone looked at Sophia, but this time she didn't shrink back. Instead, she agreed, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. Preparing for the symposium was unlike anything Sophia had done before. It wasn't just about solving equations, it was about explaining them, breaking down her thought process in a way that would make sense to others. Ms. Carter helped her structure the presentation, encouraging her to think of it as telling a story rather than just reciting formulas. Max and Lisa acted as her practice audience, pointing out parts that were too technical or needed more clarity. The night before the symposium, Sophia couldn't sleep. She kept imagining herself standing on stage, the audience staring, waiting for her to mess up. What if her mind went blank? What if she couldn't explain the solution clearly enough? She sat at her desk, scribbling and rewriting notes, but the anxiety only grew stronger. Her mom found her still awake around midnight. Sitting on the edge of Sophia's bed, she placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You've already done the hardest part, Soph. You proved to yourself that you can do this. The rest is just sharing what you love." Sophia glanced up, her eyes wide. "What if I fail?" Her mom smiled gently. "Then you learn from it. But you're not going to fail. You know why? Because you're passionate. People will see that. Just be yourself." Taking a deep breath, Sophia nodded, letting the reassurance sink in. The next day, as the club gathered outside the auditorium, Miss Carter gave a quick pep talk. "Remember, they're here to see what makes you unique as thinkers. Be proud of how far you've come." When it was her turn to speak, Sophia walked to the podium, her hands only slightly shaking. As she began to explain the problem, breaking it into manageable steps, the familiar flow of logic took over. She forgot about the crowd, forgot about the fear. It was just her and the problem, an old friend she knew well. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. A few professors even approached afterward, impressed by how clearly she had articulated her process. One remarked that he hadn't seen that level of mathematical reasoning from a middle schooler in years. Back at school, the excitement didn't die down. Ms. Carter praised Sophia not just for her mathematical skills, but for her courage in sharing her passion publicly. The math club too felt proud, not just of Sophia, but of the way their teamwork had brought them this far. As Sophia sat with Lisa in the cafeteria, she reflected on how much had changed. She wasn't just the quiet girl in the back anymore. She was a leader, someone who dared to take risks. And while the thought of stepping up still scared her, it no longer felt impossible. The new beginning wasn't just about math. It was about learning to embrace who she was. That evening, as she opened her math notebook, Sophia didn't just see problems to solve. She saw possibilities. Proof that her passion didn't need to be hidden. For the first time, she let herself dream about what could be, and she knew, deep down, that she wasn't done surprising herself or the world. As Sophia walked through the halls of Roosevelt Middle School, it was clear that something had fundamentally changed. Not just for her, but for the entire school. Students who once dismissed math as tedious or intimidating were now more curious, more engaged. Sophia noticed how classmates she barely knew were discussing equations during lunch, challenging each other to solve problems, and even helping one another with homework. It was a transformation, and it wasn't just about math. It was about belief. Belief that anyone could achieve something remarkable if they allowed themselves to try. Lisa, always perceptive, noticed the difference too. "It's like everyone suddenly realized they could be good at something if they didn't give up," she remarked one afternoon as they sat in the library, finishing an assignment. Sophia couldn't help but smile. She had never intended to become a symbol of resilience or intelligence. All she wanted was to solve a problem without being judged. But now, seeing the change around her, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. Miss Carter was perhaps the most changed of all. The once stern and no-nonsense teacher had softened, her approach more encouraging than ever. During class, instead of snapping at students for wrong answers, she would guide them through their thought process, praising effort as much as correctness. She had realized that the key to unlocking potential wasn't about demanding perfection, but nurturing curiosity. One afternoon, she pulled Sophia aside after math club. You've done more than just solve an equation, Sophia, Ms. Carter said thoughtfully. You've shown people that it's okay to be smart, to be passionate about something, even if it's not popular. I underestimated you, and I've learned from that. You're teaching this school more than just math. Sophia looked down, her cheeks warming. I didn't mean to change anything. I just wanted to do what I love. And that's exactly why it's working, Ms. Carter replied. You were brave enough to step out of the shadows. That courage inspires others. As word of Sophia's math skills spread beyond Roosevelt Middle School, other schools took notice. One day, a letter arrived from the New York Academy of Sciences inviting Sophia and the math club to participate in a special symposium. The event was designed for exceptional young minds to share how they had transformed their school environments. Miss Carter couldn't contain her excitement. This is a big deal, she announced during math club. They want us to talk about how math became more than just a subject, how it became a way to build confidence and community. Sophia, I'd like you to be our main speaker. Sophia's heart thumped. The idea of standing in front of an audience of educators, students, and scientists was daunting. But then she remembered that day in room 103, how terrified she had been to even stand up and write on the board. If she could overcome that, she could do this too. Nodding, she agreed. Preparation was intense. Sophia worked with Miss Carter to draft a speech, practicing in front of Lisa, Max, and other math club members. At first, her words were stiff and rehearsed, but with each practice, her voice grew steadier, more confident. Lisa suggested adding a story about how it all began, the day Miss Carter called her to the board. At first, Sophia hesitated, worried it would sound boastful, but Lisa insisted. People need to know how far you've come. It's not bragging, it's being honest. The symposium took place at the Academy's lecture hall, a grand, intimidating space lined with framed portraits of renowned mathematicians. As Sophia approached the podium, she saw her friends in the front row, Lisa giving a double thumbs up, Max offering a supportive nod, and even Jake, who had come along despite his usual indifference to math. Miss Carter stood beside them, her expression one of unwavering pride. Taking a deep breath, Sophia began. A few months ago, I was the quiet girl who never wanted to be noticed. I thought that if I just stayed invisible, no one would expect anything from me. Then, one day, I was called to the board to solve a problem that seemed impossible. I didn't solve it to prove anything. I solved it because I couldn't help myself. Math is something that makes sense when the world doesn't. I never imagined that solving one problem would change so much. As she spoke, Sophia saw the audience leaning in, captivated not just by the content, but by the story itself. The story of a girl who dared to stop hiding her brilliance. She explained how the math club grew, how students began to see learning differently, how failure was no longer something to fear, but a step toward understanding. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming. Back at school, the impact of the symposium continued to resonate. Teachers from other subjects started applying the same supportive mindset in their classrooms. Students who never thought they could be good at anything academic began participating more, inspired by the culture of encouragement that Sophia's story had ignited. The math club received new members, some curious, others determined to find their own hidden talents. One day, while working on a particularly complex problem after school, Jake stopped by. He hesitated, shuffling his feet. Hey, uh, can you help me with this? He asked, holding out his math homework. Sophia smiled and waved him over. As they worked through the equations, Jake admitted, I never thought math could be not scary. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. It's not about being right all the time. It's about seeing how everything connects. Once you figure that out, it's not so bad. Over time, Sophia continued to grow, not just as a math enthusiast, but as a leader. She began tutoring younger students, guiding them not just through numbers, but through the fear of being wrong. Miss Carter often watched from the doorway, quietly proud of how her once shy student had blossomed into a mentor. As the school year came to a close, Roosevelt Middle School felt different, more vibrant, more united. Sophia's journey had become a catalyst for change, proving that leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the most assertive. It was about having the courage to be oneself and the willingness to share that with others. Sophia knew that the path ahead would have its challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, and she intended to use it, not just for math, but for anything she believed in. As the school year progressed, Sophia found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. The timid, quiet girl who used to hide her abilities was now the confident leader of Roosevelt Middle School's math club, someone who not only embraced her passion, but inspired others to do the same. It was a transformation that felt both surreal and entirely natural, as if this version of herself had always been there, just waiting to be discovered. One crisp autumn morning, Sophia arrived at school to find a notice on the bulletin board outside room 103. The National Middle School Math Competition was coming up, and Roosevelt had been invited to participate. Ms. Carter, ever the enthusiastic mentor, had already signed the math club up. As the members gathered for their meeting that afternoon, the air was buzzing with excitement and a bit of apprehension. Max, who had grown from Sophia's rival to her closest math confidant, looked at the sign-up sheet with a smirk. "You ready to show them what you've got?" he teased. Sophia smiled, though a hint of anxiety lingered. "It's different this time," she admitted. "This isn't just a local event, it's national. What if I mess up?" Lisa, always the voice of encouragement, chimed in. "You didn't mess up at Columbia, and that was huge. You'll be fine. Besides, we've got your back." Ms. Carter walked in just then, holding a stack of practice materials. "We're going to need to step up our game," she announced. "This competition is no joke, but if there's one thing I know, it's that this team has what it takes. And Sophia, I want you to be the team captain." The room fell silent for a moment. Sophia looked at Miss Carter, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Me? Are you sure?" Miss Carter nodded firmly. "Absolutely. You've proven yourself as a leader, not just because you're good at math, but because you make others around you better. That's what a captain does." The weight of the responsibility settled on Sophia's shoulders, but it wasn't an uncomfortable feeling. It was challenging, yes, but also empowering. She had spent so long trying not to be seen, and now here she was, leading a group toward something remarkable. She nodded slowly, determination flickering in her eyes. "Okay, I'll do it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Ms. Carter pushed the team harder than ever, presenting them with problems that seemed almost unsolvable. There were late afternoons spent huddled over textbooks and whiteboards, breaking down equations, debating solutions, and sometimes failing spectacularly. Max took it upon himself to find the most obscure problem sets online, while Lisa, though not as mathematically inclined, brought snacks and kept spirits high. One evening, as they prepared a particularly difficult set of proofs, Jake wandered into the classroom. He had never officially joined the club but often lingered around the doorway, curious and increasingly respectful of Sophia's dedication. "Need an extra hand?" he asked, shrugging as if trying to appear nonchalant. Sophia glanced at him and smiled. "Sure, we could use a fresh pair of eyes." The team worked well together, and slowly, the fear of the national stage faded into the background. It was replaced by a sense of purpose, of unity. Sophia realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about fostering an environment where everyone felt valued and capable of contributing. The day of the competition finally arrived, and Roosevelt's Math Club found themselves in the vast auditorium of New York University. Schools from across the country had gathered, their best and brightest, preparing for a series of grueling challenges. Sophia could feel her heart thudding in her chest, but she took comfort in seeing her friends by her side. their confidence bolstering her own. The first round was a collaborative problem-solving session, and Sophia took charge, calmly assigning tasks based on each member's strengths. Max tackled the algebraic functions, while Lisa helped organize the data. Jake, surprisingly adept at geometry, sketched out diagrams that clarified the complex spatial problems. Sophia coordinated, her mind working not just on the equations, but on keeping the team focused and motivated. When their final solution was submitted, the team huddled together, waiting for the results. Ms. Carter joined them, her face a mixture of pride and nerves. "Whatever happens," she said, "you've already made me proud. You worked together, and that's more important than any trophy." When the announcement finally came, Roosevelt Middle School was declared the runner-up, just a few points shy of first place. A wave of mixed emotions washed over the team: pride, relief, and a tinge of disappointment. Sophia, however, found herself smiling. They hadn't won, but they had achieved something far greater. They had proven that they could stand among the best. Back at school, the reception was overwhelming. The principal made a special announcement over the intercom, praising the team's efforts and leadership. Students congratulated them in the halls, and even the teachers from other subjects acknowledged their hard work. That afternoon, as the math club celebrated in room 103 with homemade cookies and soda, Sophia took a moment to reflect. She realized that the competition result didn't define them. It was the journey that mattered. The late nights, the collaborative efforts, the way they had come together despite their differences. It wasn't just about math anymore. It was about growth, resilience, and realizing that being a leader didn't mean being perfect. It meant being willing to try. Ms. Carter raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To Sophia," she declared, "for reminding us all that sometimes the quietest voices have the most to say." Sophia felt her cheeks flush as her teammates cheered. The girl who once sat in the back row, blending into the shadows, had stepped forward and embraced the light. As she looked around at her friends, Lisa, Max, Jake, and Miss Carter, she knew that this was just the beginning. The world was vast and filled with challenges, but now Sophia knew that with the right mindset and the support of those who believed in her, she could face anything. After the symposium at the New York Academy of Sciences, Sophia felt as if a new chapter had begun, one filled with possibilities she had never considered before. The applause from that day still echoed in her mind, not because of the recognition, but because of the realization that her story had genuinely touched people. For the first time, she saw herself not just as a math enthusiast, but as someone who could inspire others to break free from their own fears. Back at Roosevelt Middle School, life was different, but it wasn't just about popularity or recognition. Sophia's transformation had changed the way people interacted with one another. Students who once felt too shy or too scared to participate now took chances, raising their hands, asking questions, and even volunteering for presentations. The culture of the school had shifted from one of silent conformity to one of active engagement. Miss Carter, who had always pushed her students to excel, now did so with a gentler touch, fostering an environment where curiosity was celebrated rather than feared. One afternoon, after math club, Miss Carter asked Sophia to stay behind. As the classroom emptied, Miss Carter sat on one of the desks, looking thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what's next for you," she said. "You have a rare talent, Sophia, not just in math, but in leadership. I want to make sure you keep moving forward." Sophia listened, curious and a bit apprehensive. "What do you mean?" "There's a program over the summer," Ms. Carter explained, pulling a brochure from her bag. "It's hosted by the National STEM Initiative, and they're looking for students who have shown exceptional potential. You'd be learning from some of the brightest minds in the country." Sophia took the brochure, skimming over the details. It sounded incredible, but intimidating. Spending a summer away from home, surrounded by students who might be far more advanced. It was a daunting thought. She looked up at Ms. Carter, uncertainty clouding her expression. "It's okay to be nervous," Ms. Carter said gently. "But you've already proven that you can handle challenges. You just have to believe in yourself." At home, Sophia shared the news with her parents. They were thrilled, but Sophia still couldn't shake the doubt. What if she wasn't good enough? What if everyone else at the camp was smarter, faster, more confident? Her mom sat beside her on the couch, sensing her hesitation. "Sophia," her mom began, "you've come so far already. Do you remember how scared you were just to stand up in front of your class? And now look at you, leading your team, speaking at symposiums. You don't have to be the best. You just have to keep moving forward. Growth isn't about being the smartest in the room. It's about being brave enough to learn." Sophia thought about those words late into the night, and by morning she had made her decision. She would apply. The process itself was daunting, writing essays about her passion for math, recording a video explaining why she wanted to attend. Lisa helped her with the filming, coaching her to smile and sound natural, while Max and Jake gave feedback on her essay drafts. It felt like a team effort, and that made the process less intimidating. Weeks passed, and one afternoon, as Sophia was practicing a new problem set in the library, Miss Carter walked in with a wide smile. "Congratulations," she announced. "You got in." Sophia's heart leapt. Relief and excitement blended into a rush of pride. Lisa, who had overheard, tackled her in a hug. "I knew it! You're going to crush it!" The weeks leading up to the camp flew by. Sophia prepared herself as best as she could, brushing up on advanced topics and reading about the guest speakers. On the day of departure, her parents drove her to the train station. As the train pulled away, Sophia watched her hometown fade into the distance, feeling both the thrill of independence and the weight of responsibility. Arriving at the camp was like stepping into another world. The campus was vast, filled with students from all over the country. In the opening ceremony, the program director, Dr. Lin, spoke about the importance of fostering curiosity and resilience. Sophia couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety as she glanced at the confident faces around her. But as the workshops began, Sophia found herself drawn into the challenges. There was an energy in the room that reminded her of the math club back home, a shared excitement over solving the unsolvable. During group activities, she found herself naturally taking on a leadership role, guiding her team through complex problems, encouraging them when they got stuck. One evening, while working on a particularly tough problem set, a girl named Maya, who seemed just as reserved as Sophia once was, hesitated to share her solution. Sophia nudged her gently. "Go ahead. I'm sure it's great." Maya gave a tentative smile and explained her approach, which turned out to be brilliantly creative. Afterward, Maya whispered, "I didn't think anyone would care." Sophia couldn't help but laugh, remembering how those same words had once come from her own mouth. "Believe me," she replied, "it matters more than you think." By the end of the camp, Sophia had not only made friends but had also learned that being surrounded by brilliant minds didn't diminish her own. It only made her more determined to keep growing. At the closing ceremony, Dr. Lin singled her out for her leadership and ability to encourage her peers. Sophia couldn't help but think of how far she had come, from the girl afraid to raise her hand to someone who made others feel confident. When she returned to Roosevelt Middle School, there was a new kind of confidence in her stride. She shared her experiences with the math club, emphasizing how learning from others had made her stronger. Jake, surprisingly sincere, asked, "Do you think I could go next year?" Sophia grinned. "If you work hard and believe in yourself, absolutely." Sophia knew that the path ahead was still filled with challenges, but now she understood that growth was not about proving herself to others, but about continuously embracing new opportunities. She no longer feared stepping forward. Instead, she saw it as an invitation to learn, to connect, and to inspire. Looking around at her friends, Lisa, Max, Jake, and even the newer math club members, Sophia realized that the journey was never just about her. It was about lifting others, sharing knowledge, and breaking the cycle of silence. Her quiet courage had created something far greater than personal success. It had built a community of learners unafraid to take risks and show the world what they were capable of. Sophia Adams's journey from the quiet, unassuming girl at the back of room 103 to a respected leader and math prodigy is a story of courage, transformation, and the quiet power of perseverance. In a world that often equates confidence with volume and leadership with assertiveness, Sophia proved that true strength can be found in thoughtful silence and determined resilience. Her story is not just about mastering math, it is about breaking free from self-imposed limitations and societal expectations. Sophia never set out to change her school. At heart, she was just a girl who loved math, who found comfort in the logic of numbers when the chaos of life felt overwhelming. Her journey began with a single, unexpected challenge. The moment Miss Carter called her to the board to solve an impossible equation. In that tense, quiet room, Sophia made a choice that would alter the course of her life. She stepped forward. It wasn't confidence that pushed her, but an unspoken need to prove to herself that she could meet the challenge. That choice to rise to the occasion, despite her fear, became the foundation of her transformation. After that day, nothing remained the same. Sophia's quiet genius, once carefully hidden, was thrust into the spotlight. The reactions from her classmates were mixed: surprise, admiration, and even a hint of jealousy. Yet, as the initial shock wore off, people began to see her differently, not just as the quiet girl, but as someone who had something extraordinary to offer. This shift in perception was not just about Sophia's talent, it was about how courage could change how people viewed her and, by extension, how they saw themselves. Miss Carter, who once viewed Sophia as merely another quiet student who needed to participate more, was forced to reconsider her own teaching philosophy. She realized that nurturing potential meant more than demanding loud participation. It meant understanding the quiet passion that some students carried. This insight led to a transformation not just in how she taught Sophia, but in how she approached all her students. The math club, which once seemed intimidating and exclusive, became a space of collaboration and curiosity. Through her journey, Sophia learned that leadership did not require loudness or constant assertiveness. True leadership, she discovered, was about setting an example, being willing to step into the unknown, and showing others that it was okay to embrace their talents. When she led the math club to the competition, it was not just her problem-solving skills that made the difference, but her ability to foster a spirit of teamwork and perseverance among her peers. Even students like Max, who once saw her as a competitor, became her allies. Jake, who initially dismissed her as just another quiet kid, came to respect her dedication and sought her help. At the heart of Sophia's transformation was the realization that her passion did not need to be hidden to be safe. Embracing her love for math openly did not make her less likable or approachable. It made her real. People admired her not just for her skills, but for the way she remained humble, for how she encouraged others to find their own strengths without forcing them to fit her mold. Her influence spread beyond room 103. Inspired by her courage, other students began exploring their own passions, robotics, music, literature, without feeling the need to suppress their enthusiasm out of fear of judgment. Roosevelt Middle School became a more inclusive place where being passionate about something, whether it was math or poetry, was respected. Ms. Carter introduced new ways of teaching that encouraged quiet thinkers to share their insights without feeling overwhelmed. The Math Symposium at the New York Academy of Sciences became the culminating moment of Sophia's growth. Standing in front of a room full of educators and students from across the city, she shared not just her love for math but her story, how being quiet didn't mean lacking passion, how stepping forward could change everything. Her message was simple, yet powerful. Everyone has something valuable to offer, even if they don't always know how to express it. The applause was not just for her accomplishments, but for the authenticity she displayed. Sophia's journey teaches us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It tells you to step forward when your instincts say to hide. It pushes you to share your passion even when you fear being misunderstood. Courage is quiet, resilient, and deeply personal. Sophia's transformation from an invisible figure to a guiding light shows that you don't have to change who you are to be a leader. You just have to be brave enough to show the world what you already have within you. In our own lives, we often hesitate to embrace our unique talents, fearing that they might make us stand out too much, or that others might not understand. But Sophia's story reminds us that greatness is not about fitting in. It's about being true to yourself. Whether your passion lies in numbers, words, art, or any other field, let it shine. Your quiet dedication can inspire others to be courageous too. So, how can we apply Sophia's lesson to our lives? Start by embracing your own strengths, no matter how unconventional they may seem. Don't let fear of judgment keep you from pursuing what you love. Find people who encourage your growth rather than stifling it. Be willing to step out of your comfort zone, not because you have to prove something to the world, but because you deserve to see what you're capable of achieving. Sophia's story is a call to action. Whether you are a student, a teacher, a parent, or just someone trying to find their place in the world, remember that your potential is limitless when you allow yourself to be seen. Share your ideas, take that first step, and don't let the fear of being different hold you back. Sometimes the most remarkable transformations begin with a single act of quiet courage. If you found Sophia's journey inspiring, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories that encourage and uplift. Let's embrace our quiet strengths together and keep pushing boundaries. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Stay curious, stay courageous, and we'll see you in the next story.